Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the West Fargo City Commission meeting for September 7th. Would you please join me in a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first order of business this evening is to approve the order of the agenda. Commissioners, it has been distributed to you, and it is online.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdovic. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as presented for September 7th for the West Fargo City Commission meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item D is approval of the minutes of August 16th. They have been distributed. They are online. They are pages 3 through 6.
Make motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of August 16th, 2021 for the West Fargo City Commission meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is a consent agenda. The consent agenda includes items A through K. They have been distributed. Commissioners, you have them in front of you.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Moved and second to approve the consent agenda as distributed, items A through K. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on, we are now in the regular agenda. Item number 1 is the first reading and public hearing of Elmwood Court, 4th edition, rezoning from public facilities to a planned unit development. Mrs. Sankey.
Sorry about this, let's see. All right, thank you. This application was received in order to develop a townhouse-style property. The property was replatted last summer by the West Fargo Park District to allow construction of a service road for access into Elmwood Park on Lot 1 and to prepare Lot 2 for sale in future development. At their March 9th meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the rezoning and concept plans for the property subject to conditions, including a condition that the developer meet with the neighborhood. On June 22nd, the developer met with area property owners. A summary of the meeting is included in the agenda packet. They submitted a revised site plan showing 4, 5, and 6 unit attached single-family buildings. The apartment-style buildings were removed and were changed to an attached townhouse style of structure. A typical style would be a 3-level split with a tuck-under garage. The detached garage structures were removed from the project. The unit count on the site was also reduced from 36 units to 28. The applicant also submitted proposed district standards as R2 limited multiple dwelling district with a modification to the front yard requirement from Cheyenne Street and an encroachment of uncovered patio decks 10 feet into a side yard. Access is still proposed via the existing Park District Road to the west of the property. Prior to the July 13th meeting, the updated site plan was forwarded on to area property owners within 150 feet. Any comments received after the agenda packets were published for the meeting were forwarded on to commissioners, the developer, Park District, and were added to the record. Comments included concerns regarding rental versus owner-occupied structures, increased traffic, safety, suggestions for alternative park uses. A petition was received from area property owners as well. At their July 13th meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission requested that the applicant develop a landscaping plan for review at the August meeting, as well as an analysis of the access road to determine the possibility of widening due to the shared use. For the August 10th meeting, the applicant submitted a landscaping plan and responded to the request for the analysis of the park road access. At their July 10th, or at their August 10th meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the detailed development plans, subject to 3 conditions listed in the staff report. Because of the petition from area property owners, protest area was calculated by the West Fargo GIS Department. Under Ordinance 4-546.2, if a protest against a change, supplement, modification, amendment, or repeal is signed by property owners of 20% or more, approval by the city commission would need to be a supermajority of 3/4 of the commission members voting in favor of the zoning ordinance change. As mentioned earlier, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the rezoning, including detailed development plans subject to conditions listed in the staff report. Number 1, concerns of adjacent neighborhood are given due consideration. District standards include provisions to require but not limited to supplementary district regulations, landscaping standards, off-street parking and loading, and sign regulations. And number 3, consideration of any comments from engineering and public works regarding service of the property. This is a public hearing. There are representatives from the Park District as well as the developer to answer any questions, and I believe there are also members from the public who also may have comments or questions.
Ms. Sankey? Are there any questions for her before we start?
I actually have one.
Commissioner George?
So with the farmstead having been donated by the Beaton family, how are you getting around that? Or talk to me about the donation of this property, because a lot of people have that question as far as this was donated property. So how is it being sold?
I believe Barb could answer that question. Some of the property was purchased by the Park District and some of it was donated. I'm not sure which property that included.
Thank you, Ms. Sankey. I'm going to go to our legal counsel, Mr. Shockley. I asked the question just before the meeting. John?
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. So I believe last year, the year before, the formal park dedication for what I'm going to call the pie-shaped lot, the lot that is highlighted, that was changed and removed. There was a public hearing regarding that. And so the park dedication was removed. The park dedication remains on the moon-shaped parcel that's closest to the river, and then that long parcel in between the existing townhome development and the pie-shaped lot that was actually purchased by the Park District, and that was never dedicated. That could have been sold at any time to any third party.
Commissioner George, does that satisfy your question?
So are you saying that crescent-shaped portion on the north side that's just north of the red line is part that was donated, but the part south of that was purchased?
No,
Because there's a lot of questions about this from residents.
originally, so there was a couple parcels out there. There was a long straight parcel that was closest to the townhomes that was purchased by the Park District. That is proposed to have a road existing on it and a trail. There's already a road out there. And then just the farm itself was donated to the Park District as part of the public lands dedication that you see with a lot of subdivisions. That donation can either be in the form of land, green space, cash in lieu, or other lands for public facilities, such as a water tower, things like that. So that parcel that included the farm was originally part of that dedication. The parkland dedication was formally vacated about 2.5 years ago, went through the public hearing process and everything. The park dedication for the parcel that is closest to the river remains. I don't know so that was all one parcel. Now it's divided into 1 and 2 lots. So the one close to the river that connects to the existing Elmwood Park is still in parkland dedication. And so from a legal perspective, they can sell the lot that's been replatted. It's perfectly within the authority, just like the city of West Fargo can sell property that's given to the city.
Commissioner George, does that satisfy your question?
That one.
All right, thank you.
Mayor?
Mr. Simmons.
Thank you, John. Just in my recollection, that was actually done a few years back, correct?
Correct,
Because we had been through this a few times over and over, so.
right.
I'll have a lot more to say, but maybe after.
Okay,
Public.
are there any questions for Ms. Sankey specifically? Okay. With that, we'll close the regular meeting. We are now in special session. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this item? Please come to the microphone. I'd ask that you introduce yourself and tell us your address.
Okay. Hi, thanks for hearing me. My name is Nicole Nelson, and I live at 339 19th Avenue South. That thing's weird. Okay, so I have a few points, so if you need to pause me ever, just holler at me. So the first thing concerned a couple of the recommendations, one of them being the concerns of the adjacent neighborhood are given due consideration. And you have in your packet multiple emails along with a petition, and I know we talked about like the whatever 22 point whatever percent, but 100% of people who, me and my fiance went door to door, 100% of people that answered their door signed this. So my curiosity is, who is actually in support? Because they're not coming forward. Trying to propose, I know in some of those emails, people were trying to propose other ideas for the planned unit development. And I really feel like we were trying to polish a pickle and just make the best out of the worst situation, but that's not what we want. We really are asking that no home dwellings be built there and that the land stay public facilities, and we use a more creative way to use that space as the Beaton family intended it to be used. So my second point kind of has to do with that second recommendation about the supplementary district regulations, landscaping standards, off-street parking and loading requirements, and the sign regulations. Is there a solution for off-street parking? So the documents read that, quote, a typical local street with parking on one side is going to be 28 feet from face of curb to face of curb, end quote. The street proposed for access is 24 feet wide, so that does not allow for parking on one side of that road. So then where is that off-street parking going to be? And I really hope it is not in front of our homes, because we already struggle with that median that's right there. So that is certainly a challenge for us already. And then we understand the width of the road would allow for that head-to-head traffic. And construction vehicles could get through. But my question is like the sturdiness and stability and how well built that road is. I understand there needs to be a certain amount of class 5 gravel, a certain amount of asphalt, and so I'm wondering, as far as that condition of the road, how will that hold up, and how does it compare to something as heavily trafficked as 19th? Because these people will probably be coming out onto 19th, so I feel like they should really match. And when that road fails, when that road, struggles, who is going to be responsible to pay for that? If it is Park District property, are we going to be stuck with those special assessments, or is the Park District going to step up and use some of those funds to help with that? That's a question. Every single person who mentioned information in the emails, and we put this in the petition as well, was about the increase in traffic overall. And I really don't feel like we've heard a solid solution to that problem. In the email from Andrew, the assistant city engineer for the city of West Fargo, he stated, quote, with the 28 units proposed, we are looking at roughly 300 vehicle trips per day for the entire area, end quote. So we're curious why that hasn't been directly addressed. Not only will this cause an increase in congestion and chaos, but it also becomes a safety issue with that amount of traffic, because that is a public park. I'd also like to touch on the necessity of rental properties. How many rentals are sitting with vacancies wide open? There are hundreds. And I think about Epic and all of their multi-purpose buildings. That's only going to continue to escalate that problem. And you also have to consider rental units will attract more people. And I actually work for West Fargo Public School District, and our schools are overfull. It's wild right now, and apartments are also kind of adding to that problem as well. So we kind of have to consider, yes, we want to draw people in, but maybe how much are we doing that? And then I also feel, finally, that this is kind of a values issue. The values of our elected officials feel like they no longer align with the desires of the residents. To the south of our homes, so south of 19th, there used to be trees, fields, and even a strawberry patch. Granted, myself and my family did not live in our house during that time, but our neighbors who were left felt cheated and ignored. From what we've gathered, the proposed replenishing of the removed vegetation was not followed through on by the developer, and so it feels like the trust with this neighborhood has been broken, and many are just really feeling defeated. So keeping this property, or having this property as planned unit development and developing rentals would just be, it'll really feel like another slap in the face to the community. What is developed in the community should be desired and increase value to the area, and this is really a loss. It feels like the beauty of the property to the south has been taken away, so we ask that you listen to the community and utilize the property to the north as an opportunity to enhance coveted green space. Other cities are creating green space wherever they can, including rooftops and even lampposts, because they have overdeveloped their green space. Let's learn from others and enhance rather than remove the green space we have in our city. We ask you to demonstrate empathy, integrity, and do the right thing for our community and this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Is there
Yes.
questions for the lady?
Yes,
Commissioner Simmons?
thank you. Ms. Nelson, how,
Yes.
you mentioned you were there during the South project. How long have you lived in your home? I'm just curious.
2.5 years.
2.5 years? Okay.
So that had been finished by the time that we had moved in, but there's still that plot of land where, like, Subway is, there's that plot of land
Right,
there
yep.
too. So that's gonna be, we're gonna be sandwiched by development.
Additional questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this item? So please come forward. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this item? This is my final ask. Barb, please come up. Barb Erbstosser, Director of West Fargo Public Parks.
Thank you, thank you, President Dardis and City Commission. I guess I kind of wanted to follow up of any of the public comments to provide any additional information or answer any questions, and I think there's a couple clarifications that I'd like to make. First of all, directed towards Commissioner George's question about the Beaton Farm donating the land to the Park District. And actually, I've been here for a number of years, as many of you probably know, but back in 2002, when the Park District got involved with this property, the Beaton family had sold the property to a developer. So it was not a direct dedication to the Park District from the Beaton family, so I want to make that clarification. I also want to make the clarification, too, that there were absolutely no homes, no development around that farm site. It was all field at that time, and gosh, I don't know when that started developing. The other, I guess, you know, we were here, we've been here several times, and I don't want to take a lot of your time, and I had written a letter to you trying to explain some of the positions of the Park District in just essence of time. You know, we appeared here back in 2019 with a little different plan of selling it, and there was a lot of hesitation even at the planning and zoning level, the city commission level, because we've not really encountered this before. And the one question when we got to the city commission level was, come back when you have more detail. And we've got a lot of detail. I think this is probably the third time that we've appeared before a board this year. And the last one that came up was asking for a landscape plan. And we have been working with J&O Real Estate, and they put together a very nice landscape plan that showed 70-plus trees that they're looking at planting. And so there is that detail, and then also the 4 public meetings that we've had since 2019. We put those meetings out. I know somebody commented, I think on beloved Facebook, that it was a short notice. Planning and zoning sends those out with what is set forth by city policies as to when they're put out. We did not have very good attendance at those meetings, but I was there, my staff was there, J&O representatives were there as well. And we had some really good things that came out of those meetings. We put the road in. We actually went back to the drawing board and we retained a portion of the property on the west to keep the path and the road in. Our intention was never to take out the path, and I know that's been stated a few times. We added in the road. We've gotten a lot of good comments on the road going in, and it actually provides a safe in and out access, a second access to South Elmwood Park. Once the development starts to happen, if it passes this board, we will move those gates closer to the trees. Our intent is to not have that open year-round, so we've got traffic flowing through there year-round, but that's how it's set today. We actually also retained more acreage by the river, so we can accommodate a future bike path through there once the construction is done too. So I feel like, you know, we went back to the drawing board several times, and we did what was in the best interest of the citizens of West Fargo, the adjoining property to Elmwood Park. I realize that change is difficult, and I say this a little bit cautiously, but I think the West Fargo Park District and this property has sort of been a victim to, along with some of the other development that's happened in this neighborhood, which is unfortunate. Some of the new development, we look at it now, 1 and 2 years later, and it's great. It's worked out fine. We don't intend to have off-street parking on that roadway. That's another thing that I would like to tell you that too, and I'm sure if that happens, Chief Otterness and his staff will be getting called. Though that road has been built to the standards of building a city street. That is a heavy-duty road. I drive on that almost every morning to check out South Elmwood Park, and that is a good, solid road, which we will have a partnership with the future owner of that property if this passes. But again, I had sent you an email. You know, the impact alone of property taxes, almost $1 million over 10 years to the city is what we could be looking at if this is approved tonight. I feel pretty confident. I feel very confident with the PUD. I don't get into the developing of neighborhoods a whole lot, but from what I understand and I trust with our planning and zoning department is that once it's a PUD, that's what it has to be, and it will be built according to those standards. The Park District could still, as you realize this, we could still sell this property and as is, and let the developer come through and continue to try the process. We want to be good partners to the city. We want to be good partners to the neighborhood as well, too. And I feel a PUD is really the best solution and best option in looking at this. And I think it's going to be a good fit to the neighborhood. We're very concerned about who our neighbors are going to be to South Elmwood Park. That's a long-time concern. Like I said, South Elmwood Park, South Elmwood Park especially, was there for a lot of years before we had any neighbors. And we today think we have some pretty great neighbors. I've met some of the people through this whole process, and I know they're great neighbors because they're people that I talk to, and they're people that I've gotten to know. And I'm just hoping for your support tonight on this. And as you know, J&O Properties is representing this on the agenda, not the Park District. Again, I'm just here to provide any information to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Erbstasser.
I have a question
Commissioner
for you,
Olson.
Barb. I have a quick question for you. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the emails that have come in
Yep.
and I just want to understand too, the concept as to why can't this property just be an extension of the Elmwood Park? So can you just give reasons why you don't want to do that?
This is the way I look at it, and I think my board looks at it this way too, this is a very high impact area. This is a very, we lost our access off of 13th Avenue. If we were to have park programs in here, one access in, one access out, the same. Anybody that's been to some of our park and rec programs knows that sometimes we get up to 2,000 to 2,500 people at this. Letting this sit as green space, I think it does a disservice to West Fargo, and I think it would help the taxpayer to develop it, to tell you the truth. If we knew in 2002 what we know today because of the growth of the city, we probably would have been talking to the developers about a little different area for development. And I think, maybe even some of the homeowners can relate to that too, that things have impacted us as well too for that site. We used to use that for a lot of our maintenance operations. We could not get in and out of there. Cheyenne Street access was taken away from us. The access is better, and we do like the access that goes into South Elmwood Park, but we're kind of limited on this property as well too. Park districts are not in the business to get rid of green space, I can tell you that. This is a really unique situation, and in my 34 years here at the West Fargo Park District, I've not seen anything like this, and I hope we don't have to encounter something like this again. But the city was a very much different place back in 2002 than it is today as well.
Questions?
I do,
Mr.
Bob.
Simmons?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I am curious about that as well. So even if this were to stay Park District property and you were start having events out there, I think it would be crazy. 2,300 people
Yeah.
would be how many cars? I think that neighborhood would go schizo on that alone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot worse than 28
Yep.
units.
Yep.
So-
Yeah, we have needs for parks, and, we'll look long and hard at the dedication process as we do now. With everything, our land mass doubled to the south, and that's kind of the center of West Fargo right now. And so it becomes kind of a difficulty for us.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Jurdovic?
So if 2,300 people is the benchmark, I can rattle off another dozen parks I guess we should sell to developers and put apartment buildings in. You're not gonna get 2,300 people to park around the Service Club Park at Eastwood. The huge investment on 17th that's being made, you're not gonna get 2,300 people into that park and have parking anywhere close either. So I'm a little challenged by the argument of 2,300 people being the bar for a city park
Well,
to exist.
I see this as more of an event space, just because of locale. And every park has a different use and a different, yeah. Rendezvous Park,
And that's fair,
yep,
I think that's maybe the wrong measure to
possibly.
put out there.
My knees are shaking.
Additional questions from Mrs. Erbstasser? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this issue? The lady will go first, and then the gentleman. No, please come up. You stood up first, ma'am. Come on up.
I don't feel like I could come to a meeting if I didn't stand up here and talk to you.
All right, could you please state your name and address?
My name is Julie Schauer Helgas, and I live in the Elmwood Park Addition in the very center condo that looks directly into that park. And I'm delighted that the park board is going to keep that center, that corner up there to make another access into the park for a bike path and for walkers, because walkers use that park so much. My concern is that we've talked about traffic on 19th, but I think we keep forgetting that the 19th Avenue and 13th Avenue are the only ways that anybody from the west side of West Fargo can get to Cheyenne. And so when you look at the cute little houses on 19th and the little condos, you think, that's not very much traffic. Oh heavens, that's not gonna add much, but you should see what that's like during the rush hour in the morning and the rush hour in the evening, and there are buses. There are school buses that use and stop along that road. And so I don't know what you can do about it, but when you only have 2 avenues of access to 13th, or to Cheyenne, from 13th and 19th, I'd like you to rethink the traffic thing a little bit. And also, I've got the landscape plan, which I had asked for, and I do appreciate the fact that they did it, and it looks lovely. Trees are pretty small, you know, 1.5-inch caliper tree is a pretty small tree to be planting. It's gonna take a long time. But I'm more concerned about the trees on the north side of that development. You can see where the little turquoise line goes all the way into the park. Now, if you go there, there's a lot of trees, big, beautiful trees. There's also a drainage ditch that runs along that and feeds into the river. I hate to see them take out all those trees. It's wildlife. Wildlife is there. You know, we have wildlife all over the park, but especially in that area because of the association with the river. And I've been in our condo for 13 years, and so I was living there when Hornbachers and that development was going off, but I wasn't actively involved in it because I wasn't within 150 feet of it, so I never was involved in that. But I've heard the horror stories from the people that live on 19th and what they were promised and what they got. And that's my concern too, is this looks great if it gets done correctly. And I don't know what recourse we have if any of this gets changed and the trees don't get put in. And I know that people on 19th had some very, very specific needs for trees to give them some of their green space back because they're losing it all. They lost all the green on the back, behind them on the south, and now across the street, they're losing all of their green space. I at least still have some. So those are the two things I want you to think about, the traffic and the landscaping. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Helskes. Is there any questions for the lady? All right, the gentleman, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. Brian Pattengale with Houston Engineering, representing the developer. Just want to answer some of the questions some of the residents have had. As Lisa has stated, we've been at this for 6-7 months now at this. We've tried to address their concerns as much as possible within, reasonable demands. For all the parking issues, the units are actually like 3-level splits. So there's a 2-stall, double-stall tuck under garage underneath for each unit. So each unit has 2 stalls in a garage. Additionally, we've provided 25-foot driveways in front of those garage spaces before the access roads. There is sufficient parking in the development itself. We don't want to have people parking on the park access road. We didn't feel that with the responses we got from our initial sort of development plans. The neighborhood would appreciate us turning that into a parking lot. So we wanted to maintain that sort of just minimal width, which discourages parking. Additionally, with narrower widths of streets tends to discourage higher speeds. Additionally, we don't want to make this a big 35-foot wide piece of pavement because people are going to race down that. It's sort of a psychological thing that helps provide traffic calming. It's a documented thing. So we are providing adequate parking on site. So like I said, each site basically got a standard residential driveway in front of it plus your tuck under garage. As following that up. The roadway section, as Barb mentioned, that street was constructed by the Parks Department. That is a same section as a city street. So it's equivalent as far as the section goes for engineering design. There is going to be an agreement with the parks that has yet to be worked out between the developer for maintenance and snow removal and access and all of that as it goes forward. Obviously, we haven't done that because the development's not there, but that is in works that has been sort of tentatively agreed to between the developer and the Parks Department. As far as the vacancy of rental rates, I can't speak to that as far as what the actual vacancy of rental rates in the city is. That's sort of a developer's metric. But I can tell you that if it wasn't needed, the developer wouldn't be proposing more rental units. There obviously is a need for them. They're in the business to make money. That's, they're a developer. Their goal is to make money with their developments. If they're not going to rent things, they're going to be vacant. They're not going to build things as needed. So like I said, I can't speak to the actual vacancy rates of rental units. That is sort of the theme that I just don't have access to as a engineering side outside my area of expertise. I think the donated land question has sort of been answered. I do want to touch on the traffic concerns. Like I said, it's a typical residential development. It's not excessive traffic for sort of the size. It's very typical to single family units as far as that. The overall neighborhood, that's sort of out beyond the scope of our development as far as the neighborhood to the west and how much traffic that is generated. The city engineers have looked at that and sort of said that they're not concerned with the additional trips generated by this unit and development. I got a couple other notes here. If you hold on for a second. Regarding the landscaping stuff, with the PUD, you actually have more control over it. We're here reviewing the site plans, we're reviewing all this stuff. This all becomes public record and recorded documents that have to be enforced on the development. I can speak that we have added over 100 trees, as was shown on our planting plan, a mix of deciduous and pines. So we are adding a significant parking and vegetative buffer. It's not up on the screen, but we did provide vegetative buffers all along the west side of the development, along that Parks Department row. So that's a series of trees and shrubs and various other vegetation sort of provide a vegetative screen. And that is also on the south side along 19th as well. So those are pretty extensive vegetative buffers that have been added and proposed, along with additional tree plantings. Now, yes, I will address that we are going to remove some trees on the northwest side. That's inevitable. The 35-foot drainage ditch easement that exists there today will remain, along with the drainage ditch and the trees in that easement. We are going to obviously try to limit the number of trees. I don't have an exact number how many will come down and what size they are up there in that northwest corner of the property. But yes, we are going to remove some larger trees. That's sort of an inevitable fact of development that we do occasionally remove trees, but we are substantially replacing anything that we're taking out with. The landscape plan has been proposed. Like I said, over 100 trees have been added on our landscape plan, in addition to various shrubs. I don't have the shrub numbers off the top of my head on that. So yes, we're not going to clear cut the lot by any means. We do want to keep the trees. That adds value to the property for both the residents and any occupants of the units. I'd like to answer any questions anyone has.
Questions for the gentleman? Commissioner Olson?
Just a comment or whatever, something to think about. Have you ever considered like a homeowners association type thing for here, and where maybe people who live in those units can't park on the street with their personal vehicles, that they have to actually use their driveway or their garage?
As far as an enforcement mechanism, I can't speak to that, the legality of that. It is professionally managed. There's going to be a management organization that takes care of, since they are rental units, there's going to be a management organization that will run the units, do snow removal, lawn repair, that kind of thing. I can't speak to the legality of how parking enforcement would be done on the Parks Department road. I can't speak to that. I don't know the legalities of that as far as enforcing that.
I was just thinking within the center of your development, where the townhomes are all going to be facing the street that's inside.
The narrow street inside would have to be private enforcement. That is a 20, I can't remember the exact dimension off the top of my head, but it is also a fire access road, so it is not allowed parking on that. That would be something that most likely would be enforced by the property management company, since it is a private street. I don't believe the West Fargo Police Department would go in there and ticket people unless requested by the property management agency. Like I said, it is a private street, but no, that has to be maintained open and thoroughfare because it is a fire access portion for that development.
It's just something to think about, to put the onus on them that they can't use their garage for a storage unit, and they actually have to park in their garage.
Additional questions for the gentleman? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this item? Again, we're at the first reading and public hearing of the Elmwood Court, 4th edition, rezoning from public facilities to planned unit development. Anyone else from the public? There's one thing that I've struggled with in this whole process. It says that the owner is the West Fargo Park District, which we know that. But the applicant is J&O Investments. So I struggle with that the city commission is dealing with really two entities. Because in the first place, the West Fargo Park District is a separate entity from the city of West Fargo. And many of the people in the public don't understand that, but it is. So I struggle with me making a decision over that jurisdiction of park board members that have been elected by the same citizens that have elected us to, that we would override or we would have jurisdictional oversight over the Park District. But I do understand that we do on developers. And so, but again, the applicant is J&O Investments, and the owner is the West Fargo Park District. To me, that's a difficult decision to make as to who I'm working for in making this decision.
I
Commissioner Simmons?
guess I'm not sure why, Mayor, that's so difficult. I mean.
Because we don't have jurisdiction over the West Fargo Park District.
No, but the Park District is, the board is recommending that we approve it, so obviously they're recommending that we do have that. If we, I am the only one sitting here, quite honestly, and there's maybe 2 or 3 people in this room, including Tina, Barb, that have gone through this numerous times over the years, numerous times. It almost comes back to the same issue you're talking about, who has control, who doesn't. Well, we have to work together to get the control. If we don't work as a team and we don't come together, nothing's gonna ever get done. And this will sit as it has for many, many years. So we have to work together on this.
True, but every time that we ever deal with this, if Barb Erbstasser or any member of the West Fargo Park District would give me their word that these trees are gonna be planted and the size of these trees, and they're gonna protect the walkways and all of that type of thing, I'd think nothing of it. But once we make a decision on this tonight, it's totally out of their hands. Now we're dealing with the developer. So our decision is to support the Park District and what they want to do with this property. And again, as a city commissioner, I feel no obligation to override what the Park District wants to do. So I support this. I don't support the fact that we have, once we do this, and I realize it's a PUD, and we have more oversight and ability to do that. But the fact of the matter is, we're dealing with these people, good people that we've worked with day to day, month to month, year to year at the Park District. And then we'd have a developer that's going to execute that, but these people are giving us their word that they're going to do it. And that's a struggle for me.
But it is going into a PUD, which means we are going to have control as well as the residents are gonna have. I love a PUD, Mayor. I've done this for years. There is no better way.
So do I.
There's no better way to do a project than with a PUD, because then everybody's involved and everybody has some say. This could come up, as Barb mentioned, a year from now, which it will, I guarantee you will come up. It has for 18 years. This will come up again, and they could sell to somebody else who will take that gamble. And then that developer will be in front of us, and who knows what another commission will do, or what we will do. The point being is this will come back and come back and come back.
Okay, let me ask a question. Maybe Mr. Solberg is the best resource for this. The development they refer to as the Hornbachers or the subway and that, is that a PUD? Mr. Tim Solberg, Assistant City Administrator for the City of West Fargo, former Planning and Zoning Director.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, it is a PUD, reference to the trees that were removed on the property. And in lieu of those trees removed on the property, the PUD, the developer put in a berm, which isn't very high, but a berm, and put the fence on top of the berm and evergreen trees behind that berm. So that's what we reviewed in the PUD, and that's what was constructed. So if those trees die or if that fence is not maintained, the PUD is used to enforce that in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. The point, the reason I asked him to do that,
Yep.
Commissioner, is we heard from 1, 2, 3 people that on a PUD, that those people that back up to that development didn't get what they were promised.
Okay.
That bothers me. I want to maintain the integrity of the existing neighborhoods. We owe that to the citizens that are there first.
Mayor, let me continue. I totally agree with you. I totally agree. But again, I was there during that process as well, okay? And the PUD went through, and that berm was a big issue back then, if you recall, because it was wet and we couldn't build it, and the developer, it was the weather. They couldn't get it done. They finally get it done. Now, Tim, if I could have you come up one more time, and I'm not going to get into the Scrabble, but did they do everything that the PUD required them to do? Is there something in the PUD that developer did not do?
No, not to this point. Development, there's a still piece that's vacant there, but they were required to do the path, the berm, the fence, the trees. And before we issued a CO for Hornbachers, we reviewed that. So if anything's died since then, we'd need to be notified or inspect it.
But the residents were part of that process, part of that PUD. What they wanted was the berm, so forth. So it was done, Mayor. It was done. I mean, everything there was, when you put something in a PUD, Tim, attest to that, that it gets done. If it
Well,
doesn't get done, you got to go back and the developer will do it.
Yeah, Commissioner Simmons, what was done was what was approved. So I can't say that every resident got what they wanted, but
Right.
there was a compromise and the PUD addressed that and the
I'm just
commission
saying what was in
approved
the PUD,
Yep.
what was recommended was done.
that. And if it's not done, you know, if there's
It can be
a
done.
resident who says that something isn't done the way it was intended or what, we would review that and deal with it as any other code violation.
Thank you. We're going to go Commissioner
Are
Olson
we
next.
still in the public hearing, or is it closed now? Because we probably shouldn't, are we
had the
having
same
this discussion during,
Oh, good
during the
point.
public hearing or not, is what was wondering.
Thank you, Commissioner, for bringing me back on task. Is there anybody else from the public hearing? Please join us. Your name and address, please.
My name is Leanne Drake. I live at 327 19th Avenue West. I just bought my house before, well, they were working on that development. Now, what I was giving from my realtor when I first bought my place was, on that PUD, there was gonna be trees, sidewalk, trees, fence. When it went in, it went berm, fence, trees on our side. And I can tell you that nobody has been maintaining the trees, the mowing, unless it's the residents ourselves mowing that land and pulling the weeds off of those trees. Okay, that grass all needs to be reseeded because it has pretty much died out. A. B, I have water issues in my backyard because of the berm, and when I called the city on it, it was, well, we did it to code. If your yard wasn't done to code, that's on you. So now I'm in contact with contractors to see what I can do to drain to Mr. Drew's backyard there, where he has the drainage, because it does not drain from the street down through my yard down to his drainage ditch, which is in his yard. So that's all gonna be at my expense, my time, and reseeding my grass. So saying that they're doing what they're supposed to, from my experience in the 2 years since that's been put up, they have not mowed but once. We are mowing.
But it was extremely terrible. They used weed whackers.
Ma'am, you're at the podium.
Okay,
They can come
sorry.
up again.
So, to me, that's not being maintained and done like what is supposed to be done. So, you know, I came in with my house and my place, I bought it there, and then I'm also concerned about the traffic because we have one lane out on 19th. And if cars are courteous, they try and squeeze on each side so we can go two ways. With the big meridian in between us, there's not traffic being able to go out 19th that's gonna be not congested way back a block behind me. And then I cannot get out to work or in from work in a timely manner. Or if my grandkids are there, if there's an emergency on those backed up hours, it's gonna be hard. So if that housing goes in, you need to relook at that driving access on 19th. It needs to be made into 2 lanes so that we can get out. It's not wide enough. And if you drive a full-size pickup and you have 2 of them side by side, it's a little tight. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Is there anyone else? The public hearing is closed. Commissioner comments. Commissioner George.
All right, so first of all, I want to say thank you for everybody who came to speak. This is obviously a project that's very, very important to me too, because I'm your neighbor. So this is my neighborhood too. And so I'm going to try and wear 2 hats on this because I have an emotional connection to this, but I'm trying to look at this logically too and not just emotionally. So first of all, I think we as commissioners need to remember we get elected by the public, right? Not by the developers, not by the park board. And 100% of the neighborhood does not want this. 100% of the people that elected us do not want this. I have received multiple emails, phone calls, texts, I think because people know that I'm a neighbor and will, you know, but we do not want this. This is a horrible idea, and I'm sorry to say it like that, but this is horrible, okay? The safety alone, okay? With this street, this is a narrow, winding, little tiny 15-mile-an-hour road, and I stare at it all day, every day, because it's in my backyard. And there's a bike trail that goes right through there. And I am terrified one day that a child or a pet or a person, anybody, is gonna get smacked, because you can't see, it's blind when you go around. The trees block your vision, you cannot see, and somebody is gonna get hit. So now we're gonna have 300 additional more cars going through here, 300 more a day. You know they're not gonna all funnel out in 19th because the traffic is gonna be horrible. So what are they gonna do? They're gonna go north to 13th, and somebody is gonna get smacked walking across that bike trail, and it's gonna be horrible. So they go, okay, we'll improve the visibility. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna cut down the rest of the trees. I already cried once when the trees went down to put in that road. They're gonna knock them down again to make the visibility better. That's not improving the neighborhood. Nobody wants this. The neighborhood doesn't want this. It's that I better be done, because but if we support this, you are not supporting what people want in the neighborhoods. And I can't tell you enough what a horrible idea this is. I will say this, though. You know what this should be? You know what everybody wants? I'm in this park 3 times a day walking my dog. A dog park. That is what this should be. The park district, we do not have a dog park in West Fargo. That's what this should be. That's what all the neighbors want. They want that to be a dog park. I could also see a community gardens in that corner. There's already water access to water the plants. So a dog park and a community gardens, this should not be townhomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So,
Commissioner Olson, you had your hand up.
I would just ask Commissioner George then, if it was a dog park or a community garden, where would the people park to bring their dogs there or drive to take care of the gardens? I mean, that's a good idea. But you still would have the parking issue, because not everybody's within walking distance of that park that would want to come to that dog park to do what they need to do with their dogs. So we would create probably a bigger parking issue than anybody would ever want. And since I've got the floor for 2 seconds here, the park district doesn't need our permission to sell the land. They could sell the land. It's just the rezoning of the land that they're really asking for.
Yes, sir.
Because it could be sold at any time and come in, and then that person could ask for it to be rezoned. And who knows what could go in there? It could be a gas station, it could be anything you could about imagine. But we still have to approve the rezoning of it. But here, they have met all of the
requirements.
the requirements. They jumped through the hoops. They've done the hurdles to make it something that would fit this little corner of West Fargo. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons.
So, thank you. So, and Mandy, I don't want you to have a heart attack there, so please be calm. But I do have a couple questions in reference to what you said. Number one, so then first of all, we represent the entire city, not one neighborhood. We have to look out what's best for the entire city, and that's called taxpayer dollars. You agree with that? So there are $250,000 in specials now. There's another 100 and some thousand if they have to do some tear down projects and future assessments. Are you saying that neighborhood is okay with taking over those assessments?
Personally, I would rather pay a little bit more in taxes than have that turned into townhomes.
So is
And
that
I'm gonna guess
neighborhood?
most of the neighbors would probably feel the same way. I can't speak for everybody else, but I know nobody wants this.
So that would be my one question, because that is a concern. Who's going to pay those assessments on that property? The other thing I want to bring up, and again, this isn't to these folks because they just moved in, and this nice lady in the front row, but again, I mentioned I've been through this process for 18 years, okay? When that originally was built, I was here. And I recall them moving forward with where you live, Mandy. They didn't want that either. And where you live, man, they definitely didn't want that project. And it's not to the people that live there now, it's just that neighborhood. They don't want anything there but open field and green space, and I understand that. But when you talk about that Hornbachers and that development, that is huge for every citizen in West Fargo. That brings in so much tax dollars, and it's when you buy a house, if you have a vacant lot or you have a field behind you, you darn well better expect, that something's going to change, and you can't listen, unfortunately, to your realtors all the time either, even though I was one. I respect them, but they don't have the true laws and legality. So I'm just saying I understand the position you're all in, but at the same point, we have to do something for the entire city.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Commissioner Jurdovic.
So, I agree with the point, Commissioner Simmons, on if it's an empty field, it's going to be developed. But I also believe that when you buy a house next to what is considered a city park, whether they want, it might not be Most people view it as a component of Elmwood. And if you buy a house next to any one of our city parks, you kind of buy it with the assumption it's going to be a city park. And I think that automatically gets built into the value of those homes. Pretty sure if we wanted to put condos up behind the houses that are on the south side of Rendezvous Park, people would argue that it would be devaluing their house. And I don't see a difference in this scenario. Maybe it doesn't devalue it as much, but I think, you know, there's an impact here to the value of the surrounding property owners. You know, parks, this makes total sense from a financial standpoint. I've spent more time on this than I wish I would have, in all honesty, thinking through this, because from a financial perspective, I completely agree with what the park board wants to do. But then I keep pulling myself back to the fact that I'm not sure parks are supposed to make financial sense in the role they play in our community. And so that's, I think, probably a good hint at where I'm at on this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Additional comments, commissioners?
So what is the action, Mayor, that we are expected to take tonight?
This is an actionable item to approve the first reading and the public hearing to rezone it.
Okay.
That's all we're doing is the zoning question. Now, if this goes through and it becomes a PUD, obviously the developer has to come back with us with whatever, and we can approve or disapprove anything and all that you're doing. Am I correct in that summary? Megan or Tim? Megan? Is that somewhat coherent or correct?
Hi, good evening, Commission. And I would like, I guess, Assistant City Administrator to correct me if I'm wrong, but you are looking at the development today and making a motion either in favor or not in favor of the development and the zoning,
And the zoning.
essentially. Yep, correct. And there would have to be a second
A
reading.
second reading,
Yes.
correct.
Yeah.
And even more time to work on the PUD.
I would suspect if you have comments that can be relayed to the applicant, your commission could do that.
Okay.
Because normally the nomenclature is the final plat, too.
And this application is just for zoning. Yeah, there's no subdivision or plat with this application.
So, again, restate, it is not only for the zoning change, but is an approval for the development. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Megan.
I would make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
It's been moved, and Commissioner Simmons moves, Commissioner Olson seconds. The approval of the first reading and the public hearing of Elmwood Court, 4th Edition, rezoning from public facilities to a PUD planned unit development. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Motion fails on a 3-2 vote. Item number 2 is the first reading and public hearing, proposed Willow Creek Second Subdivision rezoning, tabled on August 2nd, 2021, continued on August 16th, 2021. A request to continue the public hearing. We have Mr. Solberg, and Megan is coming up too, I believe.
It's actually another request to be continued. Do you need to come up, Megan? I'm sorry.
I was just going to note that your commission continued this item on August 16th, and we have no new information. We work closely with Mr. Shockley on this, and right now staff's recommendation is to continue the item.
So your request is to continue the public hearing. Commissioners, any comments, questions? I have a motion to honor the request to continue the public, or request to continue.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to again, continue this public hearing for the first reading of proposed Willow Creek Second Subdivision. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 3 is the discussion of the Drought Phase 3. Mr. Soberg, Assistant City Administrator for the City of West Fargo, and it looks like you have some gentlemen with you, Kellen Grubb and Troy Hall.
I do. Thank you, Mr. President. In response to the continued dry conditions our region has experienced this year, and as a response to the City of Fargo's recent move to what they refer to as Phase 3 drought response, we want to provide the Commission with some background and explanation of our efforts to seek to reduce non-essential water usage, as well as inform you of our responsibilities as a customer to the City of Fargo in advance of our consideration of Ordinance 1191, which is on the next on the agenda. On July 6, 2015, the City of West Fargo entered into an agreement with the City of Fargo to provide treated water for the residents of West Fargo, purchased by the City of Fargo. We provide this water to our customers and receive it at 2 main points from the City of Fargo, with potential of a third point in the future. Part of this agreement states that the City of West Fargo agrees to adopt and enforce an equivalent drought and water service management plan and equivalent drought and water service response measures ordinance that in the event of certain conditions could be used to ensure the same water use restrictions will be placed on all users of this system. City of West Fargo continues to hold both, and I'm sorry, I have listed up here, Kellen and Troy put a part of our agreement on the PowerPoint here, and we reviewed that again today. This indeed is the language that's in the agreement. I paraphrased it on my past paragraph there. The City of West Fargo continues to hold both surface and groundwater appropriations. However, these permits are not being utilized. Our connections to the unsustainable groundwater systems are closed and are costly and complicated to reopen without major disruption to the system. We also chose not to build a very costly surface water treatment plant. The system that we are using today provides water through our agreement with the City of Fargo, so we're receiving City of Fargo surface water appropriations. I'm here to talk about both the drought monitoring and the responses that the City of Fargo have used. Our Water Utility Director, Troy Hall. He's joined by Kellen Grubb of Beering Associates, who's their consultant with this as well. I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you, Mr. Soberg. Good evening, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Yeah, I thought we'd give a little bit of background on our drought plan. I'll talk about the Fargo appropriations, what we have for permits, and then talk a little bit about our drought plan, and then Kellen will talk about the stream flows and kind of current conditions and give some historical perspective as to where we're at. So with Fargo, we have 3 different permits to take water for our treatment through our treatment plant. One is the Red River of the North. The one's right by the water treatment plant, and that's a large appropriation that we have on that river. The second one is the Cheyenne River, and we have a smaller permit on the Cheyenne River. We have an intake right at 52nd Avenue South, and we are actually, like today, we're using both rivers right now for treatment. The third permit that we have is Lake Ashtabula, and that's really our drought backup water supply, so that's really critical for us if we would get further into this. And then as far as locations, just one thing to keep in mind, you see this map, Fargo, it really doesn't, from a precipitation standpoint, it doesn't matter a whole lot from a water supply. If rain falls in Fargo and West Fargo, it's really coming from elsewhere, so that's just something to keep in mind. We got quite a bit of rain the last couple of weeks, but it is helping, but not as much as we might think. So the water collects in different areas. So the water coming from the Lake Ashtabula, that's north of Valley City. So the water collects, rainfall up north will collect there. Also Lake Traverse, south of Wapaton, rainfall there. But probably the most critical one for us is really the Ottertail Watershed. And I do have a slide. I'd just like to explain this just a little bit more. So in order to, and this has been the most reliable source of water for the treatment plant. What you see is, my glasses are a little bit bad here, so, but you see is a graphic, and this is the Ottertail Watershed. So really, when we get rain and snowfall in between Detroit Lakes, Perham, Fergus Falls, Battle Lake, that's where, if we get rain and snow in that area, and it fills the lakes, and then it eventually runs through Fergus Falls, runs up the Red River and by our intake. So that's really what we need. And a lot of the rains we've had this summer, I watch the radars constantly, just about, and the rain, it's just the rain, a lot of the rain is just missing this area here, which is kind of unfortunate. And it did help a couple weeks ago. More rain fell in Fargo and West Fargo than it did out in Lakes Country. So that gives you an idea of kind of where it comes from. And the only other thing I'll mention, the lakes are low out there in levels. We are at a water deficit, so we got to make up some ground. And Kellen's going to show a graphic, and I think it's in your commission packet, shows how much the river flow has slowed down over the summer. So if things were to slow down, the rain just helped. But we do have an option as our drought supply to call on water from Lake Ashtabula. We'd have to work through the State Water Commission and Corps of Engineers to ask for this water. But Fargo has pretty sizable appropriations on the Lake Ashtabula, so does West Fargo. And so we figure we have a year plus worth of water supply there. If things were to get more severe, we could call upon that. And we are actually having some conversations with and trying to get steps in place where we need to do that. And I think the rain just kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit here, but we are working on this option as well. For our current drought plan, this is the one we submitted to the Fargo City Commission a few weeks ago. And really what we look at here is there's 4 different indicators. The Palmer Drought Severity Index, the Standard Precipitation Index. We look at the stream flows in the Red and Cheyenne River. We also look at the reservoir levels. And so we're kind of waiting, the stream flows and reservoir levels, we see those daily updated with the Palmer Drought Severity Index and the Standard Precipitation Index. Those numbers come out monthly, so we're waiting. They should come out about the 10th of the month, so we're just waiting a few more days, and we'll have some new numbers. We thought we'd wait for all the data before we recalculated. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But again, the recent rains helped. We're assuming that the Palmer Drought Severity Index, the Standard Precipitation Index, will improve, but we're just waiting for the numbers on that. So right now, Fargo is at a phase 3, and we're going to evaluate where we're at in the next week and look at potentially a new recommendation. So from a drought response standpoint, the biggest thing with the phase 3 is the outdoor, it's outdoor irrigation. So when we did see the rain and we went to phase 3, the rain probably helped a little bit more, but we have seen about a 30% reduction in our water demand. So the rain really affects it. We can see the demands go significantly down. And really the end game here, the thing that's really important is we gotta have enough water to keep the water towers full in West Fargo and Fargo. So we don't wanna be in a position where we're losing ground and we can't keep them full. So that's why it's kind of a phased approach, so we can kind of ease into it a little bit, and then as things get more critical, then we can make those adjustments. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kellen to talk a little bit more about the stream flows. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Kellen Grubb with Burritt & Associates. So on this graphic, this is showing Red River stream flows measured at the Fargo gauge, the USGS Fargo gauge. As you can see here, the daily stream flow is shown in blue. This goes back to April 1st through today. And also the horizontal lines on here are the 50th percentile, which is the median for the period of record, the 25th percentile flow, and the 10th percentile. As you can see, things shot up in the spring with spring runoff, and we've been on a pretty steady decline throughout the summer months, but the recent rains certainly have helped, and you can see towards the end of this graphic, the stream flows have started to come back up a little bit. This is the same data, but this is just looking at a 30-day, the past 30 days on the Red River. So you see those significant spikes in the chart. Those are the rain events that we've experienced in the last 30 days. And as Troy mentioned about the deficits in the watersheds and the basins and all the lakes being low, you know, those stream flows go right back down is what we've seen until that deficit starts to get replenished a little bit. So as you can see, this is the Red River graphic, a lot of rain in the by Lake Orwell and in Lakes Country and in that river basin. So now we're starting to see things come back a little bit. And the data this morning showed 330 cubic feet per second, and I just checked it a little bit ago, and we're already at 390 cubic feet per second. So this is something that we'll continue to monitor really closely, just to make sure that stream flows are stabilizing, and once we start to see those drop off, it's just something that we like to keep tabs on. As Troy mentioned, Orwell Dam sits near Fergus Falls on Orwell Lake. This is a critical piece of infrastructure of the Red River raw water system. So Orwell Dam discharges to the Ottertail River, which joins with the Bois de Sioux River near Wahpeton and Breckenridge, and that forms the Red River of the North. Currently, right now, they're discharging 222 CFS today, but I do want to note that the core minimum release target is 80 cubic feet per second, while the pool elevation remains above 1,060. And you can see here that today we're at 1,065 pool elevation, and I did want to mention that outflows as low as 63 CFS did occur throughout a lot of the middle of August. So we did start to see right around those minimum releases from the core. This is the same graphic, except this is the Cheyenne River measured at Kindred. The one thing to note here was that around July 22nd, we started to see things really start to drop off on the Cheyenne River, and then around middle of August, we actually dropped below the 10th percentile flow of 39 CFS, so we were below that, but recent rainfall throughout the month of August in the Cheyenne River Basin has led to that stream flow increasing as well. And we just show here the same 30-day, previous 30 days on the Cheyenne River, and I just checked this as well, and this was 184 this morning, and it's 212 cubic feet per second as of just a little bit ago. Troy also mentioned Bald Hill Dam. So this sits on Lake Ashtabula, and this feeds the Cheyenne River system. Let's see, today they are releasing around, I believe that says 197 cubic feet per second, and the core minimum release target is 13 cubic feet per second on this dam, and throughout a good portion of August, they were actually releasing the minimum from Bald Hill Dam. Last, I just want to show a couple historical comparison graphics. So this is comparing 2021 conditions, so where we're at today on the Red River. Those bars are shown in blue. That's your monthly average stream flow. And then the gray bars are historical. So in this graphic, people, the 1930s is a significant drought that's referenced frequently in the Red River Valley. So this is overlaying that late 1929 and then early 1930s data. With this effort, we were just trying to see, okay, how do we align in 2021 versus some of these past, really catastrophic droughts? We just wanted to see where we were at in terms of stream flows. As you can see, the stream flows and all the blue bars are greater than the gray bars, which shows us that we're not quite there at, like a 1930s style drought. Lastly, a drought that is more recent, the late 1980s. And the Red River actually, over the last couple months, has been the lowest since this drought period. So this was a good time period to reference. But as you can see here with July and August, 2021 actually started to dip below what we saw in 1987. So I should note that these graphics don't have September on. It seems like flows are starting to come back, you know, towards the end of August and into September now with the recent rains. We will certainly add that as we get more data. But we're hoping that when we see, you know, add September to this chart, it's above that gray bar, but we're just comparing our current conditions to historical conditions to see where we're at. With that, we'd like to thank you, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Grubb. Questions for Mr. Grubb or Mr. Hall? Commissioner George?
Can you just really simplify it in simple terms, how the recent rains have affected the drought right now? Just
So I guess I'll go back here, maybe to these graphics, this one in the Red River. So those are the significant rain events that we see in Fargo, and you see those drastic peaks because all the water's flowing into the Red River and it's getting picked up at that gauge. But because of the deficit that we have in the basin and the watershed, those haven't begun to stabilize yet, but now we're hoping that with this, you know, these series of rainfall events, that it's going to help replenish that deficit. The lakes will come up, the reservoirs will come up, and then that will start to stabilize, and you won't see that significant decrease. But does that answer your question?
yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? I was called to an emergency drought meeting last week with Mayor Mahoney, myself, Mayor Boshinsky out of Grand Forks, Senate Majority Leader Rich Wardner was there, House Majority Leader Chet Pollard was there, Appropriations were there, Chairman and all, and it was all over the Red River water supply discussion and all the concerns that they have with drought. And obviously, Mr. Hall and Mr. Grubb here are providing some of that important data to all the parties involved. So it is a real concern that we're dealing with right now. There's no question about that. Commissioner Olson?
Just one question. You know, does the city of Moorhead take water from the Red?
No.
Wapaton, East Grand Forks, all that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Moorhead does take water from the Red River. They also have wells to the east of Moorhead, so they have river and wells. East Grand Forks, I believe they take water not from the Red River, from the Red Lake River up there. Wapaton, I think they're a groundwater system, but I'm not certain about that. But yeah, we have Grand Forks has both permits on the Red and Red Lake River. I think they mostly use the Red Lake River.
Thank you.
Yep.
Additional questions for the gentleman? All right, thank you very much. This is for information only. This is not an actionable item. Item number 4 is a drought ordinance, Ordinance 1191. I'm sorry, Commissioner. Commissioner George is requesting that we take a recess, so we stand adjourned for 5 minutes.
you're right. That was a one-guy deal.
Ready? The meeting will please come back to order. Item number 4 is a drought ordinance, Ordinance 1191, second reading. Mr. Shockley, City Attorney, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. Before you, you have the ordinance number 1191 is the second reading of the ordinance creating the drought and water system response measures. There's been no changes between the first and second reading. If this ordinance is approved, then the next step is I'll be working with the city engineer and the city administrator to develop regulations to implement the ordinance. And those regulations would then come back to the city commission for approval. To be quite frank, I would not expect that the regulations would become operative until next summer. Hopefully it doesn't, but if we were in a drought situation. So this is one step in several that we're required to undertake as part of our agreement with Fargo to purchase water.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions for Mr. Shockley? Commissioner Simmons?
I have one, John. I read through this just to make sure I'm correct, that when we go through these different phases, and if we would have to consider a emergency drought, that the city commission makes that decision. Is that correct?
That is correct, Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you.
At the same time, there's conditions in our contract with the city of Fargo, correct?
Correct. You would still have to follow your contract, but we've matched the drought conditions up to what are pretty close to Fargo's. So as Fargo, I would envision it, and we'll probably address this in the regulations, but when Fargo takes action, I would expect, they'll go first, West Fargo, as you go through the different drought phases, just like it's happening now, but we're just codifying it.
Yeah,
Just to clarify, we have a contractual agreement that we need to follow.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely, and I totally agree with that. My more question, and the question asked was correct, but it's like, so say Fargo does this on a Tuesday, do we just automatically follow suit, or do we have to have a commission meeting to do it? Because waiting 2 weeks to do this stuff is kind of too long. I mean, we can't, we've been out here 3 weeks waiting, they've already went to a phase, and here we sit. So that was kind of where I was going, where, would this be automatic, or do we come back to the commission?
The way it's drafted right now, it would have to come back to the city commission. It wouldn't just be automatic. I guess I have concerns with the city commission not taking action. I mean,
Correct, so we could have a special meeting, though, very quickly.
absolutely.
Correct?
Good question. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I just thought it is something that the city commission should be making that decision rather than it automatically happening. Now, if the city commission failed to take action, there might be contractual issues with the city of Fargo, but to me, that's a decision that's up to the city commission to balance those issues out and make a
Mayor, I'm
decision.
sorry. I don't, the reason I asked that question, I don't want to lose the authority that the city commission makes it, but at the same time, I want to make sure that we're expedient, and so we could call a special meeting very quickly to get that done. We don't have to wait this 3 weeks, is kind of my point here.
Correct, yep.
Yep. And my question is, can we declare a drought emergency prior to Fargo?
Yes,
Okay. That doesn't prohibit us of doing that. If we feel we need to implement it, we can do it without having to wait for them to do it.
correct.
Okay.
Commissioners, you have before you the Drought Ordinance 1191, second reading. Your pleasure.
I move we approve the second reading.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevich seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading of Ordinance 1191, which is the Drought Ordinance. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Commissioners. Item number 5 is a presentation of the City of West Fargo's 2020 financial statements and audit. Mr. Larson, Finance Director, City of West Fargo. Also with him is Brian Stavinger from Ide Bailey.
Good evening, Commission President, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 2020 audit. While it is a few months past that year end, it's still relevant that we make sure that we take a look at this information. So the 2020 financials were audited by Ide Bailey, hired by the Commission, and that completed on August 2nd, 2021. It's a process that takes a time frame. It does take effort from staff, finance staff, as well as other members of the city staff. It's not just the financial staff that have to work on this. Tonight we have Brian Stavinger here. He is a partner with Ide Bailey, and he will be presenting an executive summary, which allows us to condense down the amount of information as well. Tonight I did present to you, as prepared by Ide Bailey, the full financial statements and audit report, federal and regular audit, as well as the executive summary. And so with that, I am going to let Brian Stavinger come up and present and respond to any questions as well. City Administrator and myself are available for questions also.
Thank you, Mr. Larson.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you very much. Certainly don't want to minimize the importance of an audit, the importance of financial statements, but I am going to go through this fairly quickly. The executive summary and all that information I know was previously provided electronically to you. You got hard copies today. And Jim informed me that he provided kind of his own commentary as well when he shared that with you a few weeks ago. So you'll probably hear a little bit of repeat from that email. But again, I'm going to try to go through it as quick as I can. I'll pause periodically as you have questions or comments to be made, and we'll get through this as quick as we can. So as Jim mentioned, 2020 audit. So whenever I talk about this year or this most recent year, always remembering it's actually 8 months ago it was finished up, so it is a little bit of some history that we're talking about. The benefit of this executive summary is we've got 10 years worth of information in most spots. The audit annually is about 1 year, maybe 2 years. So really like to give you some graphical information and allow you to see that those trends. So I'll go through first the audit opinion, very, very important. Our opinion is a clean, unmodified opinion. That's what you want when you get an audit. That means everything is fairly stated, materially accurate. Everything that's in that full audit or needs to be in that full audit is in that audit. This year, 2020, for the first time in a long time, also had to do a separate audit on federal funds. So anytime any local government receives or expends over $750,000 in federal awards, requires a secondary audit required by federal guidance. Roughly 4.8, almost 4.9 million in 2020, which was vast majority of that was coronavirus relief funds from the CARES Act, triggered that requirement. So in conjunction with your annual audit that we do every year, we also did a federal audit, heavy compliance and internal controls just to make sure you're spending those dollars appropriately according to the federal guidelines. Also a clean, unmodified opinion on those federal funds. Lastly, in this section, any findings as we go through the audit. If we have any findings to report to you, those would be reported in your full audit. We summarize those here. Two findings on the financial statement audit, no findings on the federal audit. Those 2 findings for the financial statements were also in place in 2019. Material journal entries, basically we are asked by the city to help with the pension entries. Those are pretty complicated calculations, as well as other post-employment benefits or OPEB. So we propose those entries, management reviews them and approves them. We also, as auditors, have been asked by management to prepare the full audit on the city's behalf. We prepare it, it is reviewed extensively and approved by management. Any instance where those 2 items come up, we have to report those as findings, and we do that. Again, in federal awards, no findings. That's very, very important from the federal government standpoint, that you're spending the money appropriately according to those rules. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on the high-level results of the audit. All right, continue on. We'll get into some numbers. First one here is cash. This is looking at total cash balances across the entire city, broken down into 2 categories: the proprietary, which is really the water, sewer, and garbage. That's the green for each year, and then the rest of it is really everything else: general fund, debt service fund, capital projects fund. You can see beginning in 2018, significant growth in that cash balance from 2019 to 2020. Really about $10 million in special assessment prepays from the school district, as well as the CARES Act funding of just under $5 million allowed or caused that increase in total cash at the end of 2020. What do we do with that cash as auditors and really as just finance people? We like to see, what do you have on hand, but how liquid is it? Meaning, yes, you have cash on hand, but how does that compare to your current liabilities, your accounts payable, your monthly bills, your salaries you pay, any current maturities of long-term debt? We always like to analyze, what do you have cash on hand compared to really what you owe in the next year. Minimum ratio, really any government, any company, private company, would be 1.0. If you have under 1.0, that means you don't have enough cash on hand to pay your monthly bills. That means you may be borrowing in the short term. So really you want to be above 1.0. You can see a very strong liquidity ratio, jumped up a lot in 2020 because of those prepays and CARES Act funding, but overall very strong, good liquidity ratio for the city. Questions before we move on to look at some of the individual funds? Okay, general fund. So we'll break these down into different funds. Again, very, very high level. There's a lot of information on this page, revenues and transfers in. So you look at the general fund, what do you collect for revenues, be it intergovernmental, licenses and permits, taxes. There's also transfers in from other funds. Really, most categories here are very similar with the exception of intergovernmental, and those are the CARES Act funds, about $5 million. Very abnormal in 2020. You'll probably see that continuing on into the future. And then transfers in. Transfers in are mainly from capital projects funds for administrative and engineering fees. That'll fluctuate just kind of depending on the projects in place, but otherwise good strong revenue growth in the general fund. Looking at the expenditures, so as you collect those revenues, then what do you spend those dollars on in the general fund? Expenditures also very much similar or steady growth with the exception of transfers out. Transfers out are going to happen from time to time depending on different situations. In 2020, those CARES Act funds were receipted into the general fund and then transferred out to be really segregated out and accounted for separately and tracked separately, which is a good move on the city's part, and we recommend that to all governments. So there's a significant transfer out there in 2020. Otherwise, just really slow, steady growth in the budget and the expenditures of the general fund. So the big question on the general fund, what do we have for fund balance? What do we have for reserves? Yes, those are some big cash dollars. Yes, we've got a lot of revenue coming in. We spend a lot of dollars. In the end, what do we have for fund balance going forward? Fund balance is really your reserves going forward. You do want to have a positive fund balance for these three reasons. There's several different categories of fund balance. Thankfully, the city only has 2 of them, one on each end, the non-spendable, which is very small. If you have any inventory on hand, any prepaid items, but really the far right bucket, unassigned, that's your true reserves, your true rainy day fund, and we're going to analyze that unassigned on the next page, the next few pages. Total fund balances in the general fund. So as you've progressed over the last 10 years, real steady incremental growth from 2011 to 2015, probably slowed down a little bit on the ending reserves. Still grew a little bit, but slowed down definitely. From 19 to 20, actually a little bit of a reduction in your fund balance in the general fund. Mainly 2020, of course, an abnormal year when it comes to what began in the spring, but a reduction of state aid, highway taxes, and other revenues impacted by the pandemic really just allowed that fund balance to maintain its level, a slight reduction from 2019, but very, very level. All of these are numbers, big numbers. As the city's grown, the numbers have gotten larger. What we always like to do is we like to turn that fund balance into what is that as a percentage of your budget, essentially. What you have for expenditures in your general fund, what is the fund balance or what is your reserves compared to that? So you can see on this page, that grew for the first 5 years, peaking in 2015 at just under 200%, or essentially almost 2 years worth of reserves in your fund balance. You could have operated your fund or your general fund essentially without taking in any revenue for about 2 years. That was back in 2015. That has slowly decreased. 2020 decreased down to 136%. Still very, very strong reserves. But you can see essentially what this means is your expenditures have grown. As they've grown, your fund balance has not grown at the same level, the same pace, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means that as it's grown, your reserves as a percentage of your total budget have decreased a little bit. But overall, still a very strong fund balance, very strong reserves. I'll pause there before we move into some other funds, see if there's any questions. Okay. Sales tax fund. Sales tax fund collects revenues. In 2015, a new sales tax was enacted. That's why it jumped up so much. Good, slow, steady growth. Even in 2020, I can tell you halfway through 2020, when we had some check-in calls with the city, it was kind of like, how are the sales taxes going? I don't know. I don't know how they're going to end up. Actually end up about a 9% increase in sales tax collections in 2020. Those revenues are collected, and then for the most part, they're collected and utilized to transfer out for use in capital projects and economic development. So in general, you collect them in and you transfer them out. At the end of the year, what do you have for fund balance or reserves in that sales tax fund? It's pretty evident here. In the last 3 years, you've targeted roughly $4 million is what you want to maintain in there, and the rest is transferred out to support capital projects and economic development. Capital projects fund. We don't focus so much on revenues or transfers in. Those are mainly transfers in that fund the capital projects. Focus more on expenditures. Of course, depending on the different projects going on, this will fluctuate up and down. These are really all non-utility projects. Utility projects are accounted for separately. But you can see in 2020, just under $50 million in expenditures in that capital outlay fund. At the end of the year, what is the fund balance? You can see negative for the first 7 years, positive in 2018 and 2019, and then a slight negative in 2020. It's really just the way that fund operates, essentially pays for the cash, or I guess pays for projects up front and essentially gets reimbursed once the projects are done by finance or bond proceeds. So typically you're going to have a negative fund balance there. really changed in 2018 and 2019 because of the Cheyenne Street project. That was just so large scale that kind of modified the way that the financing was done. 2020 kind of reverted back to the more typical way to finance projects, pay for cash, get reimbursed later. This is all managed very, very well. No concerns here that this would be negative. Water and Sewer Fund. On the Water and Sewer Fund, a lot of information here too. The main thing to point out is that yellow line, that very bottom line, that's depreciation expense. Depreciation expense is a non-cash expense. We point that out only because if you look at the actual results of this fund, it shows as a net loss, but that's because of the depreciation. If we back off the depreciation, that's really the top three lines. Operating revenues, which there was a rate increase on July 1st of 2020, causing that 2020 revenues to go up. Expenses, excluding depreciation, so really more of your true cash outlay. And then the red line there is essentially your net income or net loss, excluding depreciation. You really want to be at a minimum of break even. You usually want to generate a little bit of profit here, and that's really what it's been doing once you exclude those non-cash depreciation items. Depreciation continues to grow. There's been a ton of investment in infrastructure in the water and sewer funds. That means increased depreciation. We monitor all of that, but I would say that red line is the most important. Really from a cash flow standpoint, you're generating positive cash flows, positive income. Questions on that? That can be a little bit confusing. Okay. Net position here. Net position in the water sewer fund, 97% of it is infrastructure. So in the general fund, when you look at kind of the reserves there, that's more cash and liquid assets. Not the case here. Just under $350 million in net position or reserves. Almost all of it is infrastructure investment. Really shows you the growth in the water and sewer fund for sure, but citywide. A lot of investments in infrastructure. More important that we monitor would be the year-end cash. What do you have for cash in that fund? Very, very strong growth beginning in 2015, and then it's been much more steady. But at the end of the year, just over $12 million in cash in that water and sewer fund. Last one, the garbage fund. Revenues in blue, expenses in green, and then operating income or loss. The garbage fund typically right around that break even. Sometimes it loses a little bit of money. Sometimes it gains a little bit of money. The last 2 years, 2019 and 2020, generating positive operating income. But overall, pretty steady, right at or above that break even line, which is what we like to see. Net position there, about 50% of that is infrastructure in the garbage fund, otherwise more liquid. Pretty steady through 2018, some growth in the last couple years. And then year-end cash has grown significantly in the last couple years, at least comparatively. At the end of 2020, just over $3 million in cash in the garbage fund. Okay, I flew through it. Hopefully giving you, though, a good high-level overview of the financial results for 2020, compared those to historical. And I'll just ask for final time for any other questions that you might have.
Gentlemen, questions for our commission? Question for you on your depreciation schedule. Does infrastructure, do you actually do a depreciation schedule on the infrastructure in
Yes.
addition to the physical assets that you have in that department?
Yes.
What is the rate on the depreciation schedule for the infrastructure?
The infrastructure is usually on between a 35 to 50-year life.
30-year to 50-year. Jim, can you tell us what we do?
Yes, we depreciate at 50. We use a 50-year life for most of our infrastructure, which I think is pretty similar to what actual life we're experiencing.
Thank you kindly. Thank you. Good question. Anyone else? Mr. Stavanger, thank you. Thank you, Ed Beatty, for your services.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Larson, is this an actionable item that you want us to approve, the audit report, I would assume?
Yes, if you would be willing to make a motion to approve and receive it as presented. Appreciate it.
So moved.
Commissioner Simmons moved. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. And moved and seconded to approve the West Fargo 2020 financial statement and audit as presented by Ide Bailey and Mr. Larson, Finance Director for the City of West Fargo. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you again. Item number 6 is the Red River Regional Dispatch Center consideration. This is an update from Dennis Otterness, Chief of Police, City of West Fargo. Chief, welcome this evening.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and members of the commission. Very brief tonight. I've got an action item for you to consider related to the Red River Regional Dispatch Center to appoint Cass County as a fiscal agent and recommend SEH as our architectural design contractor. The City of West Fargo is a participating agency and holds a seat on the Board of Authority of the Red River Regional Dispatch Center, also known as a triple RDC. The triple RDC serves to combine public safety, communications, and dispatch services in a jointly operated dispatch center. And we've been participating since 2008. That triple RDC was originally formed in 2001. The population served by the triple RDC since its inception has grown exponentially. And recently, an ad hoc committee of the triple RDC has been working on addressing site and space needs for the past 3 years. Discussions have been held with the city, county administrators, elected officials in the past year to determine the most appropriate path forward. The committee has found there to be a strong support from all entities to move forward with building a new dispatch center to serve our communities for the next 50 years. Cass County government has agreed to serve as the fiscal agent on the project. Representatives from the cities of West Fargo, Moorhead, Cass, and Clay counties have recently conducted interviews of architectural firms to assist in site selection and conceptual designs for a new center, and we are providing this firm for your consideration of support tonight. The recommendation is that the City of West Fargo agree to participate in selection of a location and building or renovation of an existing building to house our triple RDC and support Cass County government serving as a fiscal agent for the project. The City of West Fargo agrees to support the recommendation of the Joint Selection Committee for Short, Elliott, and Hendrickson, SEH, architectural firm for the selection and design of a new triple RDC. And I'll stand for any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Chief. Questions?
Mandy's got it first.
Mandy, please.
I was just wondering what kind of financial obligation we have for this as a city.
I guess I'd have to probably defer to the city administrator on that. There's a formula that we pay into. I don't have those numbers with me tonight, exactly what that formula is, but it's based on population. And so it serves, as you know, the triple RDC entities both on the North Dakota and Minnesota side. So we all collectively on the North Dakota side pay into Cass County, all the entities, Fargo Police Department, West Fargo Police Fire, Fargo Fire, and then Cass County serves as our fiscal agent into that triple RDC to fund that every year. But I don't have the specific formula with me tonight.
City Administrator Fisk.
Yes, in relation to that, the formula is going to be altered based on our census numbers. And so when we have that information, I will bring that forward to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
As Chief has indicated, it's going to be based one of two ways, either on population or the number of calls coming into the dispatch center, because there is a little bit of difference in the ratio of population to the calls. It's interesting data to study, and so that's still to be determined. We're also working with a third entity that might also join the Red River Valley Dispatch Center, one of the local hospitals and their dispatching of their ambulance service. So there's lots of things in discussion here. We already participate at the level that we do, and there's no additional financial obligation being asked this evening. We have hired an architect, and Chief Otterness and myself were both part of that review committee for the City of West Fargo. So there's no obligations now, but there's a lot of discussion going on. Commissioner Olson.
Just for clarification, Chief, under the recommendation that says we're going to participate in the selection of a location and building and there's slash renovating of an existing building. So are we looking at doing both, building a brand-new one plus renovating the existing one?
No, we're, thank you, Commissioner, for the clarification. So there's a site committee that's put together that is formed from several members from the Board of Authority that are looking at not only potential build sites, but also existing sites that might be suitable for renovation. The difficult part with a dispatch center like this is there's specifications that it has to be met to weather certain, weather events like tornadoes, hardening of the building and such. So there hasn't been a final site selected yet, so we will continue to participate in that. I will as a member of the Board of Authority, but that decision has not been made yet, where that site will be.
The existing dispatch center is not a hardened building. The Red River Dispatch Center group, the consortium owns the building. That will be sold. But they're looking at other potential buildings. It has to meet a Class 5, which is virtually tornado-proof for a dispatch center. Because of the importance of emergency services, they can't go down. The company that they've selected, that the chief has in this report, has built over 400 of them across America.
Many of them in Florida that are hurricane-proof, and so they're very familiar with hardening of buildings and weather events, although, a little bit different here.
Commissioner Simmons.
Who sits on this committee, Chief?
Commissioner Simmons, which, on the Board of Authority?
Yeah.
Or on the Site Selection Committee?
Well, either one. Who sits on it for the city of West Fargo?
I do, on the Board of Authority.
And how about on the committee?
Well, there's several committees. The Site Selection Committee is made up of several members from the Board of Authority. There's personnel committees that we have a representative on. I serve as the chair of the Personnel Committee. We have a presence on the Finance Committee. There's an Operations Committee that are all subcommittees that make recommendations up to the Board of Authority, and then we bring those to our...
I guess where I'm going with this is I find it somewhat insulting that as police commissioner, I haven't been involved in any of this. To me, that's a little bit, when we came out in 2008, I was a major player in that. And I was actually the police commissioner back then. I was part of it, involved with Chief Rasmussen, getting involved in actually pushing it with the former mayor. And quite honestly, other than one conversation, I don't know anything about this. I don't know if you other commissioners do, but I think it's a little insulting to me as police commissioner.
There's been no decisions made.
I realize that, but you guys have been having, let me speak my piece, and that's all I'm saying. As police commissioner, as a street commissioner, or whatever commissioners we are, I think that is part of our portfolio that we should be involved a little bit more in this stuff. That's just my opinion. Thank
Just
you.
for clarifications too, Commissioner, we are at the very infant stage of this, where the Site Selection Committee has just been made up out of members of the Board of Authority. And so the architectural firm selection and the review of those different proposals, the mayor and I both sat through those just to I guess, finalize who we're going to use as an architect to now start looking at sites and design and all those kinds of things. So there'll be a lot more decisions to be made moving forward. We're right at the beginning of it.
Again, I sit on the fire department portfolio as well, and I was involved in every one of those decisions as the architect and everything else. I'm just saying, I just think, I'm just a little offended by it, that's all. I'll live with it, but I want you to know that.
Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President, members of the commission. I did want to note that currently Tina and I have been meeting with the city of Fargo and some of the other member entities, and we're looking at reconstituting the board. And so that discussion about, and it's being generated by the construction of this new facility. And we haven't really come down to what that board will finally look like.
I haven't seen any
But the concept is that elected officials would be on that board rather than the police chiefs and the fire chiefs. And so those discussions are underway right now. Just, they haven't matured enough yet to come forward to the commission. So I think as a group, we've heard that concern that the elected officials would like to be on that board. And so we're taking that back and looking at the amendment when the dispatch center was first started years ago. It was born out of necessity because he needed a regional dispatch center. And so anything born out of necessity was sort of being, you know, they were building the car as they were driving it. And now we have an opportunity to look back and say, we need to make these changes to how the board operates in the subcommittees. And so we've been having some initial meetings about what that board structure should look like. But I think it's safe to say the general comment is that the governing board of that authority will have elected officials from each of the member entities on it.
I think it absolutely has to. If we're spending taxpayer dollars, you have to have the elected officials on that board.
President Dardis, I have another comment. Commissioner Simmons and the rest of the commission, we were taking the directive through the county. The county took the lead, and they requested that each city have the city administrator, the president of their board commission, and either a police or fire chief for this initial part. And so that was their request, and so that's how those got chosen. It wasn't anybody picking. If you want to place blame, I should have kept you more informed, and I did not. But this was a decision originally, and the county administrator told me himself, he goes, I'm kind of going blind, I don't know. He said this is all new to him as well, so he's learning, just like we are. But it was a directive from the county level, and that's how the participants were chosen.
Any additional questions for the chief? This is an actionable item. Cass County government has agreed to serve as a fiscal agent, and we, as one of the entity members of that, we have to, it's going to be in the Clay County, Cass County, Moorhead, Fargo, and West Fargo all at once. Everybody that's having a meeting this evening is voting on this same item.
I will make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the Red River Regional Dispatch Center consideration as presented by Chief Otterness this evening. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 7 is the first reading ordinance 1195, legislative amendments. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. Before you, you have ordinance number 1195. As the commission may be aware, every 2 years the legislature meets and has a new set of laws that become effective on August 1st. And this ordinance is really to bring most of our criminal ordinances up to the same level as what's in the state. And so we're just conforming the two together. And I won't go through each change because some of them are very minor, but the big change is reflecting the change in federal legislation and state legislation regarding tobacco sales. The T21 legislation that came through last year at the federal level made tobacco sales illegal to anybody under the age of 21. That's a change. You'll see that going through the ordinance. We modified shoplifting to match the new definition that is in state law. You'll see references to electric bicycles in there, and then also possession of a firearm at a public gathering to bring that in conformance with state law, and then some other what I would call just conforming ordinances. I can certainly answer any questions that you might have, but this is just to conform our ordinances with state law.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions for Mr. Shockley from the commission?
I move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. We are approving the first reading of ordinance 1195, the legislative amendments. Commissioner George has moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson has seconded. Been moved and seconded to a first reading ordinance 1195, legislative amendments, as presented by Mr. Shockley, our city attorney. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 8 is the second reading of Ordinance 1192, hours of operation for liquor sales. Mr. Shockley, City Attorney, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. This is second reading of the ordinance changing the hours of Sunday sale for alcohol. No changes have been made between the first and second reading. As a city, you're not required to adopt this, but a lot of the licensed establishments had requested the additional hours of operation. And so staff brought it forward based upon the requests of the businesses to have extended hours.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions for Mr. Shockley? It's your pleasure, Commissioners.
Move we approve the second reading.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve the second reading of Ordinance 1192, the hours of operation for liquor sales. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 9 is public hearings to confirm and approve special assessment list for the follow improvement districts as presented by Mr. Shockley. 1321, Wilds 11th edition. 1322, Eaglewood 7th edition. 1323, Brooks Harbor 9th edition. 1325, Oak Ridge 9th. 1329, Oak Ridge, Eagle Run 9th. 2254, Eagle Ridge Plaza 6th. 4063, Wild Storm Sewer Lift Station. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President and members of the West Fargo Commission. Tonight you have before you the appeal hearing for any party that wishes to appeal the proposed assessments in the districts that you had just listed out. The Special Assessment Commission published the lists, held hearings, and then the proper procedure is if anybody that objected to those assessments would file a written appeal, and then the commission would hear that written appeal. These districts, we only had, my recollection was one person show up and they didn't necessarily have an objection. They had a lot of questions about the nature of the improvements, who owned the pond, what the pipe looked like. Those, I mean, they were really good questions. They just weren't really objections. Her questions are satisfied, and the Special Assessment Commission voted unanimously to approve the assessments as proposed and move them forward. As of today's date, we have not received any written appeals for any of these districts. And the work has been completed in the district. You've already bonded for the districts. You've already spent the money. And so this is the final step in the process where you would just be confirming the activities of the Special Assessment Commission in levying the special assessments. Also, just for public information, and the staff has done a fantastic job of notifying everybody, but tonight we are not considering District 2250 because we're still working on some policy changes that we will be bringing forward to the City Commission. So I can answer any questions you might have. If there were somebody here that wanted to speak to it, you would have discretion as the board to listen to them. You wouldn't have to legally act on their appeal because it wasn't properly filed. That's a decision for the commission. I don't know if anybody's here, though.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Again, the special assessment review of that it's normally to be presented to Mrs. Fisk in advance in writing, and we've had none in writing, so we feel that there's no appeals to any of these particular assessment districts as listed for you today. So is there any more discussion or any questions? Please, Commissioner Olson.
Do these have to be acted on individually, or can one motion act on all of them that are listed here?
You, as the commission, you could act on all of them since there is no appeals. There's no objections. There's no particulars to hear. You could make one motion to approve all the districts and confirm them because there's no written appeals.
Thank you. Additional questions of Mr. Shockley?
I'll make a motion to approve them all at one time.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Been moved and seconded to approve the special,
Nobody second yet.
oh, I'm sorry,
I'll second, though.
Commissioner Olson.
Have a
Everybody keeps telling me what time they want to be home tonight, so I'm trying to hurry this along.
No, you're right.
Emily started at 7 o'clock. So, thank you, Commissioner Olson. It's been moved and seconded to confirm the improved special assessment list as the following: 1321, 1322, 1323, 1325, 1329, 2254, and 4063. Is there any further discussion?
Does there need to be a public hearing? It just says that in the title.
Technically, it's a hearing, it's not a public hearing.
Okay.
You would have to have filed your written
The
appeal.
written,
Okay, I was just making sure.
okay, very good. Commissioner George?
So everybody here knows how I feel about special assessments, and I don't care for any of them. Looking at this list tonight, I looked at each of them pretty carefully. I really don't like how a couple of them are laid out, but considering there are no appeals, there's no objections, no, you know, they do have to be paid for, the work is done. That's how I'm basing my vote tonight, so.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Any additional comments from the commission? We do have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Commissioners. Item number 10 is an Improvement District 1339 Stockyards First Edition. Mr. Scott, City of Engineer for the City of West Fargo. The task at hand is to approve a task order number 49-1 for basic services. Mr. Scott.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Commission President Dardis and members of the Commission. As directed by the City Commission on August 16th, we are working on the plans and specs for the construction of improvements in the Stockyards First Edition. Before you tonight is just a task order for the basic services that will be performed by Moore Engineering. The value of the task order is $267,630. With that, I will answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Questions for Mr. Scott?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdebig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the task order for 49-1 for basic services for Improvement District number 1339, the Stockyards First Edition. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Item number 11, 2022 Final Budget Adjustment Request by Commission. Mrs. Fisk, City Administrator.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. In your packet, I have a list and I have some information. At the July 19th Commission meeting, the Commission directed staff to continue to seek reductions and indicated a desire to try and reduce 1 mil, which equates to a reduction of $197,000 to the preliminary budget. After that meeting, a request was distributed to all the department heads requesting that they give an additional review to try and meet the Commission's request. This will be the third request of reviews and cuts to each department in order to reduce their expenses while continuing to provide the services required to operate the City of West Fargo. With a combination of staggering employee hires, removing employee training options, cutting other public services, we have been able to consider and bring before you a reduction of $159,787 from the proposed budget. The reductions come from the Departments of Administration, Information Technology, Engineering, Planning, Police, Public Works, and Fire. All the reductions, if you choose to approve them, would equal 0.81 mils for the general fund and fire, or $3.65 per $100,000 of home value. We were not given a directive to request any reductions of the library, so there are none attached for them. On the attached sheet that you have as well, it lists each department that has proposed cuts from their budget. Please note that all the items that are cut will need to be reinstated to the 2023 budget. So at this time, what I would like to do is go by department and get the consensus on, from the commission on by department, which items you would like to cut, if any. And we would start with administration. The cut was 2,000.
Commissioner Jurdovic.
So, and I'm bringing something to the table late in the game here, but it was actually listening to Bailey talk that kind of popped this in my mind. So, and I don't have the budget in front of me, so I'm gonna use rough ballpark numbers. But in the budget, there's a line item for the police department for 300 and some thousand for new squad cars, correct?
Yes.
And from my understanding in conversations, that line item is there, because we kind of approved something mid-year this year to spend some money that wasn't gonna be spent on new police cars. But from my understanding, at some point in our history, we've let ourselves get kind of behind in equipment replacement. Correct?
You are correct, yes.
So that's sort of an out of ordinary position that we're in, and we just have to get caught up, correct?
We are caught up, I do believe, and Chief Otterness can correct me if I'm wrong, but the 3 police cars is our normal rotation per year to keep the fleet up to date. Is that correct?
That's correct. Working with Mr. Larson in finance, what I've tried to do is identify through a budget request adjustment last year, spending some positive budget performance or some savings that we had to try to shore up that gap in our fleet. But moving forward, what we're trying to do is stabilize that so we don't have years where we're asking for 5 cars one year, 1 car the next year, and so to try to stabilize our police department fleet and our budget. We're looking at, trying to get maybe 3 cars per year to keep up.
And I'm not trying to cut those 3 cars, just to clarify before I continue.
That's just the rationale behind it, to try to stabilize that number moving forward.
So, and maybe I'm misunderstanding some of the ways we can spend this money, but we are still sitting on a few $1 million of COVID money that we have taken in that we have not allocated to anywhere. Correct?
Commissioner Jervig, no, we have used some of those funds to reimburse COVID expenses, but also in this budget, what was done is the COVID money we got from the state initially went into the police department fund, which created a positive balance that was then transferred into a special fund to be used. And we have actually $1.174 million of that money in this budget to keep expenses down. That was one of the ways we were able to cut that $4 million down. So we are using that money.
So how many millions do we have left that hasn't been allocated?
I believe in that fund it's just over 2 million. Yes, and the point behind it is that we didn't want to just use it all up at one time and then have something come along that's a very good project that you would like to use the funds for. So we found one-time purchases in the budget, and that's how we came up with the 1.174. If it's something that you would purchase or pay for and not buy it again the next year, that seemed the best and most logical way to use the money and save the dollars for the taxpayer.
And that's fair, and I started down this path thinking that these squad cars we're talking about were more of a one-time catch-up. But I would still potentially argue that if we're already taking $1.5 million or whatever the amount was out of COVID, but we still have millions sitting there, we could accomplish this, pulling this budget back by taking another 150 or 200,000 out of that and then not having to necessarily, line item by line item go through this. I mean, it just seems like a easier solution that doesn't necessarily come by sacrificing some of the training and so forth. So just it was a thought that I kind of came to over the course of the meeting. So.
And I appreciate, that's very true, Commissioner Jervig. We could take whatever out of those funds. Just keep in mind that, again, any purchases of recurring expenses like their police cars will come back, and we'll have to deal with them next year as well. So, and however you guys choose to do it, it's your guys' call.
Commissioner Simmons has a point.
Thank you, Mayor. I just find it absurd that we're sitting here talking about taking $80,000 from the chief of police. We're talking about $2,000 from city administration, and yet we're giving the library over $200,000 in increase. We are too. We're absolutely doing it. I know you're going here with the $100,000 or the the mill, but they had money in the account. We forced them to spend money they shouldn't have had. That's how we got to that mill levy. My point is this, I am not gonna support anything where we're taking any money from a department that does a good job of saving. That's like the government. You save the money as a department, then all of a sudden you give it back. I understand that process, but these departments are doing great jobs. The only thing I'm gonna support, I just assume do the increase, as Commissioner Olson had said, let's just go with what we got originally and let it go. I'm not gonna cut these departments. I won't support a budget like that.
So, and you and I can agree on the fact, as it relates to the police, because why I'm bringing up this alternative idea is we're sitting on a couple $1 million we haven't figured out how to spend, but yet we're raising the mill levy on our taxpayers simultaneously. I would rather use some of that money to offset that for the next year, and we still would be sitting on.
If we can. I don't know that we.
Are there restrictions on what that can be used for?
This particular portion of money, the 2 million, this is not the federal money that just came through the state that has a lot of restrictions. This particular money doesn't have a lot of restrictions. The importance of keeping in mind what we do with it is that we're gonna have, even next year, we're gonna have to use some of that money to keep the mill levy at a decent amount so that it's not a big increase. And so we're trying to weigh, if you look at our financial statements, they showed you today, our general fund, once it was audited, has dropped $1 million from 19 to 20. And if we need to transfer in what we budgeted for 21, it's gonna drop again. So our concern, myself and the finance director and the assistant city administrator, was we wanted to be cautious and we wanted to be careful. We don't want to just find ways to just spend that money. We want to do it in a way that benefits the taxpayer the best, not just say, well, I want to get it down to 0 mills, so let's do this, and then next year all of a sudden we're in the same boat. That's kind of what we were looking at. Again, this is totally a commission decision on what you want us to do. The current budget of increase of 4.5 is where we're at. And so it's what you choose.
Commissioner Olson.
So a lot of the expenses out there are, what do you think, out of our control, more or less, because of everything else costs more, right?
Yes, and I handed out a sheet to you, and this kind of will tell you a little bit. The finance director, Jim Larson, provided this. I had a request from Bernie to pull it. The U.S. average in July was 5.4% inflation, but in the Midwest where we are for our communities, it's 6.1%. And so if our budget was to account for that, we would need a larger increase than, we're trying everything we can to keep it down.
My turn. Thank you, Mrs. Fisk, for the efforts on yours and all the department heads and Mr. Larson. The point that Commissioner Simmons just made with regard to $2,000 from administration or X number of dollars from the police department is noteworthy. I'm concerned about something else, and I'm very concerned about it. I was told last week by an analyst in Cass County that there's 10,000 job openings in West Fargo, or in the Cass County. 10,000 job openings. 25,000 in the state of North Dakota. Supposedly, job service, they're reporting and stuff like that doesn't count anymore because people aren't even posting jobs anymore. Take a look at our community with the portable signs that we see around here. This budget has a 1% increase for a cost of living for all these wonderful people that do all the work around here. My concern is as important it is to get back on time with maintenance and purchasing of equipment like we did with the garbage trucks or our police cars. If you don't have somebody sitting in that chair, running that police car, or driving that garbage truck, where are we? And a 1%, is if you take a look at any reporting agency will tell you that inflation's running 5% right now. So my concern here is that if we're going to invest some of those additional dollars that, Commissioner Jurdevig was trying to get the answers to and the like, we need to review that. Now, I understand that if you take a look at the way that our pay schedule works around the city of West Fargo, that if you go from one classification to another or number of years of service, there's still going to be some raises there. But the fact of the matter is, if you've ever been hired a lot of people, and all of us have got great work experience, we know what that's like to retrain people or to recruit people or trying to retain them. Retain, recruit, or replace. And that's expensive. That's really expensive. So as we continue to review this budget, I realize we've already capped what the budget can be with our preliminary findings. But I think that we as a commission, we need to really think this through as to how we're going to do this or where this money is going to be applied. And I think we need to reinvest any dollars that we possibly can into retaining these wonderful people that we have working for this community. And I'm going to leave that up to staff as to how to figure that out, too. Commissioner Simmons.
I would suggest that we leave the budget as it is and move forward, and just leave it where we're at, that 4.5. Leave it there. Let's just move forward and worry about our employees next.
Well, this report this evening from Mrs. Fisk is a response from our request to go find additional savings. So we do have a preliminary budget that has been posted with the Cass County Commission. So, we can do that. We can think about what was discussed this evening some more. We still have a little time, not a lot. Or if you're inclined to make your motion, then you do what
I will make that motion because I don't want the staff to spend any more time on this. Let's just move on. I think we'll be fine. Again, then we'll have to look at the employees next. That'd be my motion.
I have a motion by Commissioner Simmons. I have a second by Commissioner Olson. That we move on with the preliminary budget as originally posted, correct?
Correct.
And with the possibility of reviewing COLA also. Is that correct? Motion and second? Okay. Any discussion? Commissioner George.
Just a quick comment. So I missed the last meeting because I was working during that time, but I did watch it. And at the end, when I saw Commissioner Olson's comments, honestly, I was kind of a little taken aback initially by it because it was like, well, they should work on cuts wherever they can. Now I see that you have, I see what you've done. I'm impressed with the work you've done. But after seeing it and thinking about it in the comments made tonight, I would agree with what I'm hearing with everybody else here. I think we leave it as is. I would support the increase in wage. If we can reasonably take money out of COVID funds, I would support that too. So I think these are all fantastic ideas, and I'd support any of it.
Thank you, Mr. George. Commissioner Jurdevig.
Well, my comment, and it might just be the way the motion, but I will say it just seems like the comment was because it's tough work. No. Let's just move forward with what we got. And I mean, the budget of how we spend our money as a city is probably the #1 job we have as commissioners. So I'm not sure I like at least kind of the vibe that I feel like was coming from that. If we have a responsibility to try to, if there's a way to not raise mills to 4.5 and to have it be at 3, that's a win, or 3.5 or whatever it is. And I can agree with, I mean, I also am concerned about our staff, and therefore I'm going to go back to, we have millions of dollars, a couple $1 million of COVID money that we don't have a plan as to what we're going to spend it on, but instead we're going to let it sit there while we raise the mill levy. And so, I'm going to vote against the motion, but it's not necessarily it's not necessarily a vote against the idea of increasing our cost of living. I just kind of disagree with, I don't know.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. I'm just going to make one more thing because I don't want people to put words in my mouth. I'm approving this and making the motion because it's a damn good budget and you worked your butts off to get there. That's why I'm approving it. Not because it's easy, because there's nowhere to cut. It's pretty common when you look at Commissioner George and Olson. So my motion is because you did a great budget. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Fisk wanted to make a point.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner President. I just wanted to reiterate for the public that doesn't realize what's been going on behind the scenes. We started this budget $4 million in the hole because of decisions that have been made and changes that have happened, which is fine. We had it from double-digit mill levy increases down to just under 6. And at that point, we thought we'd done a fantastic job. Well, then we found another revenue source and said, okay, now we got it down to 4.5. And so we were really happy because everyone worked, everyone cut, everyone sacrificed. And so I appreciate the motion, and I appreciate Commissioner Jaravig and what he's saying, but I do believe that this is the leanest budget we can have. People still want services, and we have to give them to them. They demand more and more every day. So thank you.
Just ask one.
Commissioner Olson, please.
So, through the whole process, you've trimmed away all the fat.
Yes.
And by making this additional trim of the budget, we're now getting into the meat.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's gonna hurt, even though it may be training, it's still a service, because we need to be trained to provide the service. And as in your report, it says that these items, that if we would cut them today, they're gonna be added tomorrow. So like all we're doing is kicking it down the road one more time. So that's why I'm in support of leaving it the way it was.
That is correct. We have slashed overtime for the police department because they aren't always able to get their hires started on time, so we cut their overtime. That's where the 80,000 comes from. We've got things that we needed in engineering, they're slashed. We took out street sweeping, for instance. Matt Anbig reduced a street sweeping budget for next year. And then it's travel and it's training, different things like that, staggered hires, all those things, yes.
How many hires are in your budget at the present time?
Not very many. I think we have,
6?
you got to, now you're making me think. I was looking at, is it 6 or is it 4? Okay, it's 6. 1 in the general fund, 2 in fire. And then the others are in the non-tax levied funds.
Yeah, I thought you had one. Okay.
She answered it when she was done.
We have a motion on the table. Is there any further discussion? Emily, can you read the motion back, just to make sure that we move forward with the preliminary budget as whatever the date was that we accepted that, with the possibility of looking at COLA?
I have it all written down.
Okay, well, the fact is,
July
it's
19th.
preliminary
No,
budget.
not July 19th. What was the date, Jim? The preliminary budget approval?
August 19th, I believe, the last.
August 19th is right.
So I have it written as the August 19th date for the preliminary budget that was originally posted.
Well, on page 372, it says at our July 19th meeting.
It's supposed to, yeah, that was a typo. August 2nd? August 2nd. So yes, that should say, shouldn't say July, it should say August on the memo.
Everybody understand the motion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carried. Number 12 is the city administrator's report. Mrs. Fisk.
Thank you, Commission President, Commissioners. I've just got a few items and I won't drag them out. First of all, I just wanted to get you up to speed. There have been some concerns at the parking garage. We have individuals that are kind of loitering in there. When the Tiger Lily concert was going on, some individual climbed over and got backstage with them a couple times. And we've had people standing on ledges and dropping things from the top or whatever. And so we are looking into screening to try and screen that south side, something that wouldn't be, not something hideous, but just something, we're just gonna look at the costs of trying to provide a protective barrier, because if one person falls and gets hurt or killed, that would be terrible. And so we're looking into trying to find a way to protect people basically from themselves. So, and I will be bringing that back to you guys so that you can see and make those decisions. I just wanted you to be aware that we are looking into it. We also are putting up signage in there that tells people that they cannot loiter. If you're there, you parked a car, you get out, you go somewhere, you can't just walk around in there or sitting there. So, and that will allow the police department to be able to enforce better. So, we're preparing signage for that as well. The other thing I wanted to remind you is the North Dakota League of Cities state meeting is September 16th through 18th, which is next week, Thursday through Saturday. I will be gone the 17th and 18th for that conference, and I know President Dardis is going for sure for at least a day, but then is coming back for West Fest. So I just wanted to kind of give you the heads up on that. I want to take a moment to congratulate Brian Matzke and Matt Anvig. They put in a grant request at WaterSmart, and I put the information in your correspondence packets. And they received a grant towards their AMI project of $75,000. So they did a great job. Every dollar helps. So thank you. Let's see. In October 12th, 13th, the Economic Development North Dakota Conference is going to be held in West Fargo. It's going to be a big event. Governor will be here. Just keep in mind, mark your calendars, and we'll send out reminders as well so that if you can attend, that'd be fantastic. So, and last but not least, I just kind of wanted to give you an update. We've been having some serious safety concerns with court. The judge is not comfortable because she has to walk in through all the defendants and then walk around. Clerk of court, the clerks are way down another hallway, and so we've got defendants sitting in the main hallway, walking around all over the place. So one of the things that we did, because we're out of space, our intention is to take the West Fargo room and we're going to make that into the clerk of court's office, and then they would have to cut a hole in the wall and then create a walkway, a safe walkway for the judge to get up here. That's the best workaround we could find. We'll create a new window for the clerk, and it'll be right by here so that they're able to try and keep people more contained. But it is becoming a big issue. The more cases we have, you can have 50 people standing around out there, and it's not safe. The police department is fantastic about helping out, but it is a serious issue. So I just wanted you to be aware that that is what we're working on, and it's for the safety of not only the clerks, but our concern for the judge and the others. So do you have any questions for me on that?
Is there a reason she couldn't come through this door?
I think she exits that door. I'm not sure.
Well, if she exited, I would think she could come into it. It would save us a whole lot of money.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't answer that. Jim, do you know for sure what her reasoning was?
That just exit out.
I don't know where it goes. It just goes right
It goes straight outside.
So she'd have to exit from the exterior to this room.
Right, but if she exits it, then what's the difference? Why could she not enter it? Just saying, it seems like we might want to think about that before we start remodeling and spend a whole lot of money, if that's the case.
Relationship to the room itself or the court staff.
I'm assuming it'll come before the commission before you follow those plans through, correct? Before you start spending money on it?
The cost estimates will come before commission for approval if you would like. Typically, when we're trying to just make space at City Hall, we've just kind of taken bits and pieces and tried to do the best we could. But if you would like us to, I definitely will bring those forward to you for review and approval.
I guess I'd kind of like to know just what it's going to cost us before we do it. Maybe there's other alternatives.
Okay, I will do so. All right, and that is all I have. What do you have for me?
And you distributed your correspondence, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Questions for Mrs. Fisk on correspondence or her city administrator's report? Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any of you have any non-agenda items you'd like to bring forward tonight? Staff, anybody? Department heads, anybody that'd like to bring something forward this evening? I'd like to, there was an item on the consent agenda that kind of went unnoticed, and that is Public Works, Matt Anvik, putting out for bids to get rid of the riprapping around our lagoon cells. Good work, Matthew. I mean, we're getting paid for them to come and get it out of there. We'd had to get them out of there before you can fully reclaim them anyway, so you got somebody to buy them and to remove them. That's top-notch work, so my congratulations to you and your team, all who were involved. Please give them the thanks of the City Commission for that. And I think that generated $200,000 plus in revenue. Good work. Commissioner Simmons.
Move to adjourn.
Commissioner Olson.
Second.
We are adjourned.